is so strong on us that even if we are able to rationalize it or just think, it's arbitrary, there is something that is
It
beyond
isn't.
us,
This is the thing.
which
It
pushes
isn't.
himself.
What you're talking about is also
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin and Jacob, for joining us. We're so happy to have you, the Cross Focus team. We are so happy to have you here.
likewise, man.
Um, yeah. So even before we start, I'm gonna ask both of you to introduce yourself. First, we'll give it to the elder one, so that yeah, Jacob, do you wanna start it first, and then it's over to Kevin.
Sure.
What do you do? What do you do? And where you're from? And yeah.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jacob, and I'm from Bangalore. I've been born and brought up here. I'm Malayali too, just like Kevin. I mean, at least we find our roots there. And I work for an organization called Life Focus Society, and that's the work that I do is primarily to engage with culture and how we understand culture and the themes that are there in culture. And I look at it from a religious point of view. I'm married, and I have a daughter who's a year old, a little more than a year old, and yeah.
Perfect. Kevin.
So I go by Mr. Kev. That's my artist name, and I am a musician. I consider myself an artist more than a musician. I look at it from a perspective of general art, not as music, because I believe in today's world it's very hard to be seen as a musician alone, because there is no real avenue for music, to be very honest. So I see myself as someone who is creating art of which are multifaceted, which with my main focus being on music. And wow, man, I mean, I just wanted to bring that fact that Jacob must have had a tough time because of COVID, and having a kid during that time, dude.
Yeah,
Big
yeah.
respect, dude. Big respect. It's
It's an
insane.
interesting time, but my work requires me to travel a lot. So because of which, this time I was at home. So in one way, the COVID helped me during my wife's pregnancy. You're
That's
not
good.
married, right, Kev?
No, I'm not. I'm not. Not yet.
All right.
So, a little bit more. I work. I have a day job. Day job for every artist is always there. And yeah, I would categorize myself as an atheist. So,
Hmm.
since that's the topic of conversation, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jacob and Kevin, for sharing. Okay, so I'm gonna ask three questions, three common questions to both of you. First, I'm gonna ask Jacob, and then it goes to Kevin, and then back to Jacob, and then Kevin. So it's gonna be like that. So three common questions, and then I'll leave that to you guys. Each of you will get 15 to 20 minutes to ask some questions. It's gonna be a time of cross-examining and things like that. So the first question that I have for Jacob as well as for Kevin is what is the origin of life? What do you think is the origin of life? What do you believe in? Where did life come from? Jacob and then Kevin. Yeah.
Um, that's a good question. I guess when you're saying the word origin, I'm guessing you mean like macro origin, right? Like origin of the world in that sense, right? Not just my personal origin. Well, I guess there's a lot of angles that we can take this from. But I guess for the sake of this conversation, and because I come from a religious front, I'm a Christian, I guess I would primarily base it on God, that ultimately we are created beings by God and with a purpose. So our origin lies in Him. In that, having said that, that does not diminish the what whatever scientific material causes and causation that's part of it. But if it has to have an origin, there is a cause behind that origin, and I take that as a Christian from the Genesis account, that we are created by God for a purpose.
So Kevin.
Okay. So I go from a very different perspective in the sense that I don't necessarily see a particular theory as the reason for the, the cause for an origin, because at the moment they are postulated theories that are working theories, right? They don't necessarily know yet. that's where I'd stand. More or less, I stand with Jacob in the sense, the only difference being that I don't believe in a in a creator per se. I just believe that we are yet to find the answers to it. At the moment, what the working principle or the working theory that we have currently is the Big Bang theory. I'd go with that. We
Hmm.
come from nothing is essentially what that principle states, and there is some sort of logic to it. That's where I'd stand. Yeah.
Hmm. All right. All right. Thank you so
Yeah,
much, guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
pushing on that. Like, I don't primarily look at the theory of evolution or the Big Bang theory of any scientific theory that's postulated here as an what antagonism or or against the proposition that the Genesis account is giving up. I guess one way to look at the Genesis account is not to is to look at it for as a work of literature, and one of the things that Kevin, which I found was interesting, was he looks at him as an artist, right? And he looks at music as one way in which he brings out his artistry. And I guess we could look at the Genesis account as a work of literature, right? As a work of art. Now, the problem with us in the 21st century is we immediately, because of the advancements of science and because of what science has given us, we impose that theory onto ancient texts and try to pull it from it. And so then, in one sense, we misrepresent it. I guess the Genesis account is not going against the material origins or any other scientific hypothesis that's out there, but it's giving like a grander story. Is your life random? Well, the Bible says no, it's not random. It had a purpose behind it. It was there, conceived in the mind of a creator before it came into existence. So I would agree with Kevin, or at least I'm not too knowledgeable in the scientific area. But even if it were, I wouldn't look at it as antagonistic to the Genesis account.
Hmm.
I
All right.
respect that. I respect that, man. Many people don't really see it as that, and I mean, kudos to you for actually taking it forward like that. Yeah, but that's one of the things I would see differently in terms of the main reason people have a faith or a religion has to do faith in the sense mostly linked to the religion side of things, is the quote of purpose of life. If you see every religion, one of the main things that they give, or at least people cite that they give, is that purpose for life. Be it Hinduism, you have a certain sense of purpose for life. Even for Muslims, there is a certain sense of purpose for life. Even Jainism has their own accounts of purpose for life. But um, I've come to this term, and to be very honest, there isn't really a what do you call it? This is usually a personal choice that you can live by, and I've come to a point where uh, I've come to terms. It's you don't need what is the word I'm looking for? um, what is it called?
Like a
You don't.
transcendent purpose or
No,
some.
no, no. It's not. It's not even. Uh, when your girlfriend breaks up with you, closure. You don't need to know why she broke up with you. She broke up,
Unicontent.
that's it. You can still live your life. So just I know it's a little off branded, but yeah,
No,
the
yeah,
I'm okay with that. It's not a question that I keep thinking about. What's my purpose in life? I go by this idea that that's one of the atheistic purposes, I mean, atheistic viewpoints that I've developed over the past decade that I've been an atheist, or like my past decade of like growing from like a theist to an atheist, is that you can have your own purpose without really believing in anything, and it's totally fine. And forging that path is much more, what do you call it, it's much more strenuous, because it requires a lot of self based belief. You need to have a lot of belief in yourself to go by those principles. You won't have, at least one of the things that religion provides is this solace that somebody is watching over you, who is taking care of you and stuff like that. And once you move past that, um, you know mindset, you're in this place where the only person that you actually can believe in is in yourself. And the motivational drive that requires to develop over there is, I'll tell you, it's very tiring. It's it's not easy. So yeah, that's some, I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but Jacob, building over you, and yeah, I like the fact that you have a very different approach to what at least the popular apologists have. So that's great.
But can I respond? Is that okay, Lloyd? Or do you have?
I think maybe you guys can note it down, and during the yeah, I think that will be
Let
much
me. What
better.
is that? Very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. All right. So the next question, I think you guys already touched that. What is the purpose of life and all that. So I'm going to move to the third question. And okay, so the third question is, what is our destiny? What do you think, Jacob? What is going to happen after we die? What will happen after we die? So that's the next question.
Yeah.
You do you want me to switch around?
Yeah, oh,
Because
okay.
I
Yeah.
think Jacob has been answering the
Go for it.
questions.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
All right. Yeah,
it
yeah,
will be fair if I. Okay.
yeah. Okay, yeah.
So,
So, Kevin.
mine is very simple, man. I don't believe in a destiny. I think it's humans see, that's one of the things with the brain. Humans want to see a purpose. Without seeing a purpose in certain things, um, there is no motivation. That's a huge statement to make, but I'm still going to make it. It's that you don't need a purpose to live, because there are several organisms that live and die, and their purpose is solely to progress a certain sense or a semblance of living things. And there isn't any reason, and I don't believe in having a reason for this thing. There can be causes, like this causes this leads to this, and the reason behind that is being this particular things changed, that's why things moved over here. The new building came because the old building was broken. That's the reason, the purpose of the new building has to be for this. But I don't necessarily, it's only a human tendency to see purposes and destiny, because we all have, it's a psychological factor that we see. Um, we search for the need, we search for the, um, what do you call that, the end game of things. You always want a closure. So that's where I'd say I stand.
Yeah. Um, I guess responding to that, and both the point about purpose and one thing that Kevin says, which is in one sense, if I have to put a tagline to it, it's the Freudian argument. That a religion, like, we can't live without hope. So as human beings, we have to create hope. Whatever it is, of an afterlife, or there's something beyond, in order to make value and purpose in our life. And a person who breaks out of that is Nietzsche, right? Friedrich Nietzsche. And that's one of the things that one of the what philosophy is that Kevin very courageously holds on to, the fact that human beings have to uh, and it's honest. It's hard. It's hard. You're going to cut yourself away from any divine protector out there, which means that then you have to make it yourself. Then the self becomes center, and then you're pushed towards getting it there. um, I guess one argument that I would move towards is the argument of desire by C.S. Lewis. And what C.S. Lewis very interestingly says is that, see, the Freudian argument is that anything like this is just a psychological crutch, right? You want safety, you want meaning, you want thing, so you project it onto the divine, you project it onto the transcendent, and then you live safely under that. What C.S. Lewis says is that the fact is, if the understanding of hope or afterlife or God is actually a universal phenomenon. You find it in every civilization that's there, whether it's the Aztec civilization, whether it's the Mauryan civilization. Now, that the way in which they construct that story and how they look at the transcendent can change, but it's a universal condition, and not just, and it's found throughout time. And he says that if human beings find in us a condition like this, then the best possibility is that there is actually a reality out there that corresponds to those desires. And this is what, and the example that he gives is hunger. Hunger is a natural desire. It's not just we as Indians or South Indians have hunger, it's a universal condition. But there's something like food out there to match that condition that is there. Or love is a universal human need, but it isn't a made up psychological condition. There is an actual person out there to fulfill that, and like that, any human condition. So he says the mere fact that we as human beings think of hope or think of a world beyond the material world, that once our material body decays, does that mean that we perish? That's it. Or is there the fact that universally we have a transcendent, that we there is an eternal purpose to which we are part of? He says the best explanation is that maybe there is. What that is, well, I holding on to the Christian worldview, have an answer to that within that paradigm. But I mean, that's his explanation, which I kind of move towards.
All right. All right. Okay. Now time is open for cross questioning and all that. So Kevin, you want to start? You want to?
In terms of asking Jacob,
So do
see,
you agree with whatever he said, or do you want
I
to?
agree from a viewpoint of, yes, there is. I understand why humans look for a purpose, but I don't see that as being a god. That's the only thing. Like, I'll give you an example. When people talk about spirituality, right? Um, it's highly unfortunate that people think um, atheists don't have spiritual experiences. Spiritual doesn't necessarily mean um, non. I mean, like supernatural. Okay, a spiritual experience could just be something that gives you goosebumps. Like for me, a spiritual experience would be going for a concert of an artist that I really enjoy. That would be a spiritual experience, but the definition, of course, is different amongst different people. The other day, I think we were talking about me and Lloyd. We were talking about the definition of some word. The thing
Yeah.
changes. Like it's as simple as this. When we say, when in colloquial terminologies, when we use the word theory, we say my theory is this. But when it comes to the scientific side of things, uh, theory does not mean uh, a it means a postulated thing that's been cross verified by multiple sources, and then come to a conclusion saying that this is the working principle that we have so far, and we have several things that are running based on those principles. So like, how words are utilized are different. The definitions might be slightly different. Eh, that's what I was essentially coming to when I said a spiritual experience. Something that gives me goosebumps is music, movies. They tend to give me a certain sense of goosebumps. And I remember which movie did I watch recently that put me to tears. There's this movie called Coda. If you haven't watched it, please watch it. It's about, Coda stands for children of deaf adults. Okay. It's about this girl, a teenage girl, going through a high school, who wants to sing, who's in a family where there are three other people, whose mother, father, and a brother, all three of them deaf. By the end of the movie, I was in tears. Like, and when I was watching the film, like, it takes you through that experience, right? It gives you a certain goosebumps. And I think that has to do with our human capacity of showing empathy. So there are different facets of humans that are basically reactions to what we are experiencing. So a spiritual experience, when we are talking about it, for me, like, I don't think many atheists agree to spiritual experiences per se, but when I'm talking about a spiritual experience, that's what I meant. I have a goosebumps kind of an experience. I have an emotional experience when I meet my family after a year. It's an emotional experience. It's a for me, I would categorize that as a spiritual experience.
No.
That's about it. Like, that's what I
And
was coming to.
and I think that's true. And I think one of the critiques that we can do, especially with the people within the what a religious community, is to ascribe a very reductionist view of atheists, of saying that they are incapable, or thinking they're incapable of having these kind of experience. And this is something that Sam Harris says, whenever he goes on a mountain and he sees the world around him, there is ecstatic experience that is there. It's larger than life. It's beyond. And in one sense, um, and there is a scientific what biochemical reaction here, but it's not necessary that every atheist reduces it to pure biochemical reaction. It's part of it, but the experience is real, and so in that sense, I think that's a self critique we as religious people should do, is to not to impose very flat out reductionist ways on which a person who cuts the trans or does not look at the transcendence, or whatever, however they define God, think that they cannot have those kind of experience. So I agree with you, and
I think so. Like in the defense of since you defended my community, I'd like to defend your community as well. It's usually in debates that they bring that up. When you see atheists being reduced to moralless being,
yeah,
because where is the moral when there is no when you don't believe in a god, you can just go committing murders and rapes and whatnot. That's a, yeah, exactly a reductionist argument, but that comes from a place where you're trying to debate. So
mhm,
in that sense, it's usually who comes out on top. The debates are
mhm,
usually about who's superior. So in order to make that claim, usually people basically tend to do that.
okay,
And yeah, I understand why that is, but that's fine. At least with people, when I'm having a conversation like this with you guys, I don't really experience that per se. I get asked, so where is your moral based on? I
yeah,
think that's one of the questions that Lloyd had asked last time. um, where is my moral based on? I think morals are derived out of the society that we live in. Because if we are going based on a moral that's depicted based on religious texts, then an Indian moral wouldn't be the same as a tribe that's living in Indian tribes. Morals isn't wouldn't be equivalent to an African tribe, both of them believing in two different gods, having God, believing in God, but at the same gods, but at the same time having different ritualistic purposes, and having very heinous things being let go, passed off as, yeah, it's okay. I mean, there are still some African tribes. I believe there is one in Lakshadweep as well, who are what
Mm.
do you call what do you call them? Cannibalists. Not am I saying? Am I thinking? Is it Lakshadweep? I don't know. There are these the secular sorry secluded community which has not been touched, um, which are living in like the first world kind of, like, yeah, the caveman kind of living.
yeah,
They still live like that, and it's not all that far from India. So I believe it's Lakshadweep. Just go check that out. So this tribe has been untouched, and they are cannibals, is what they are, what the sources say. I don't know if we can believe it, but that's one of the things. Yeah,
yeah.
what I was trying to come to is that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, but see, even if they do that, and culturally that is what they do, uh, we wouldn't say that's necessarily right. Right? I wouldn't agree with the fact that all our morals are purely social and cultural based. That we create our own morals. Now, what you're saying is right. Like if you look at the Old Testament, or when you look at other cultures and their religious text, the way in which they practice their laws or rituals at that a period of time might not apply to us. But in one sense, say like empathy, love for another human being. Okay. Now we would say it's not something that a society merely constructs. And if a society comes together and says, no, we are supposed to eat each other, just because majority of them or that whole society thinks that's right, does that okay? Does that sanction that type of violence? And uh, even in purely humanistic values, and it won't hold in any court of law, or any way in which we look at civilization. Uh, it is yes, human beings collectively, can create heinous acts, and just because a majority in a particular geographical group decide on something, does not make it right for them. They still need to understand it. Even like what's happening in Afghanistan, that it is something that they need to. We won't. The world won't say, yeah, what's happening there is right. Go for it. Uh, at the same time, yeah, we need to be step back in imposing our what uh, imposing without understanding the cultural context. So that I agree, but I don't think it's purely based on society. I think its values are there, and then
Okay, I'll extend an olive branch to that. I'd say yes, several developments have come based out of religious texts. That's one way I'd see it. If that's what you're meaning, that's what you mean. I
no,
don't
I'm not
necessarily think there is an
this.
intrinsic moral because. Oh yeah, go on. Sorry, Jacob, to cut you off. Go on.
No, would you say that there is an intrinsic morality to help or love another person? All right, as opposed to hate them and want them dead. You know, isn't there, or is it just us who think that is right, and someone in New Zealand can think the opposite right is right?
See, this is what I said. Like it depends on the society. In certain societies, it's fine. Like if we go to a different generation in Europe, if you didn't like another person, you duel it out.
You
Dueling
duel
was
it
the
out, but
thing.
that still has a particular rules behind it.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
even
yeah,
them,
yeah.
they have particular
Go even
framework
further,
and
even
go
further
on.
back. There wasn't any rule, right?
Mhm.
Now I'm trying to build on the fact that it's based on where you live. It's not necessarily based on an intrinsic moral. I'll also pitch this in a different way. um I don't think morals are necessarily black or white. I think
Yeah,
there are gray areas. And usually people tend to see it as when we talk about morals, people tend to see it as a black or white thing. But in real life, it is being seen as there is a lot of gray area that we just chuck out. So that's one way I look at. For example, uh, a mother trying to defend themselves ends up defend their kids from getting burned, shooting someone. it's, it's seen on a surface level, it would be seen as immoral because you take away another person's life, but it's an act of defense. There was no other option, and hence you resort to committing a violence. And that's what I meant. There is no absolutes to morals, and since it's every day, we tend to I don't know if I can make this much more clearer. But as the world becomes much more open source, we are seeing much more refined way of moral principles that are coming thrown at us. And I'm not necessarily saying it is right or wrong, but I'm also saying that these are the gray areas. We are still learning on these gray areas, what is morally right, what is morally wrong. Somebody who is mentally abusing someone is seen as a crime. Push back 50 years, it was not even seen as a crime. So I mean, it's what I was trying to develop into. Yeah, go
yeah.
on, Jacob. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. See, if we have if we impose a very childlike, naive, black and white morality into the world, and then use religious traditions to sanction it, then one is we end up imposing that very harshly on people, and then life is there's always a gray area. And one of the trends that we are seeing in whatever movies that come out now, even yeah, whether it's Cruella or the Joker or the Game of Thrones character, there's always a backstory to them, so there's no clear what villain in that sense, because they have a backstory behind them which led them to come to this area. And why people accept it is because we resonate with it. In our own lives, we know the decisions and choices that we take is not black and white. How do I live as a husband? How do I live as a son? How do I live as a father? How do I bring these identities together? How do I make choices? Like, there's always that gray area that is there. But having said that, if it's purely arbitrary, If it's purely random and there's no hierarchy of values that I hold on to, then there is no reason to choose one particular trajectory in the gray area rather than the other. And there's so
Come again,
everyone,
come again.
in the
Sorry.
sense that everyone has to impose a value hierarchy that what is better. Now here is a gray area and you have to make choices, right? And all of them seem somewhat okay. There's no clear black and white here. Okay, they are in the, but on what basis do I make that choice? Unless I have a particular value of morality or understand there is some transcendent morality that is much greater than me, that's beyond, it's not purely subjective that I'm choosing or a group of people that is choosing. All right. But
That's where I would that's where I would
disagree.
disagree, because
It does
it
not.
would
What I'm saying is,
it
I'm
would
not.
revolve around your society. It would, whether we like it or not. Yeah, go on, sorry.
No, but I see. I think the true heroes, like when Mahatma Gandhi came into India, there was only two things. There was either the moderates or the extremists. Either bomb blast the Britishers or petition with them, and that's the
That's the
majority who.
misconception, right? No, that's the
No, but
misconception.
he's coming into a society that largely has these, but he's not staying within it. It's very possible for people to transcend their cultural morality. And true heroes, in one sense, have always done that. People in the Nazi era, who what is the natural morality there is to gas the Jews at that point. But there have been were Germans at that point in time who were there who felt no, even though that is the majority thinking or that's the cultural thinking, I will transcend that. I will move over that. So to think that human beings are mere puppets of the morality that is there in culture is to reduce the individual conscience that we impose, and then we take.
Not necessarily. So I'll take the same example as the Nazi Germany thing that you said. Do we view are we going to view Hitler as a heinous person?
You're asking me.
I'm asking you.
I mean, I wouldn't agree with what he did was heinous. Uh,
Hmm.
what are the death rates and the atrocities that were created was heinous.
Hmm.
So yeah,
but
in
but
that way.
but there were certain morals that he lived by.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the
Yeah.
morals are right or wrong. I'm just saying there were certain morals. I'll give you an example. This is one of the things that we see in history. um, when we see someone who's committed a crime like Hitler, there's clearly no one else other than probably Stalin, who's worse. People don't even talk about Stalin the way there's no Stalin references that go like, stop being a Stalin, grammar Stalin. you know, think that should happen at some point of time. Anyways, coming back to this, the idea that uh, in history, when somebody does such heinous crimes, we are seeing them completely as that person who does the heinous crime. We don't see the other facets. But this person had a life they were living where they were in peace with people around them. People around them loved them, adored them. And there is even, you've heard of the whole Rocky story, right? Rocky and Sylvester Stallone. Wait, sorry. Yeah, Rocky and the dog and the Sylvester Stallone story, where Sylvester Stallone had this dog. He was homeless. He was basically homeless. The only possession he had was his dog. So to sell the script, he sold his dog, and then he sold the script, and with the money that he had for the script, he came back, purchased his dog back from the owner. And it was like $400. He paid $4,000 or something like that. This is the story that goes behind for Sylvester Stallone. There is a parallel story like this to Hitler. Hitler loved his dog. He's an for a person who loves dogs, and like who has that relationship, would actually relate with the way Hitler related with his dog. He wouldn't go out anywhere without his dog. His I don't remember which dog it was.
Yeah. I,
Might
I
have been
mean,
a
see,
Rottweiler, but
I,
yeah,
I get
I'm,
the
I'm,
point.
I'm trying to what I'm trying to say is these are these are not intrinsic moral values. These have been developed over a period of time, and they are developed over a particular set of things. Yeah, I get that. It's always a building block, man. Like there are like we agree on this fact that morals are gray. We're still finding out what the thin line is between what can be considered moral and what can be considered immoral. It's very hard to determine a person's intent. Determining a person's intent is life or death in at the courts. Before it wasn't. Based on what we are talking about in terms of like religious morals or any other form of morals, it isn't. It's seen as a black or white thing, and it's not embedded into each person by a supernatural entity. It's usually something that develops based on what is seen around. Psychology plays a huge important role into it. If you see if you um, if you're living in a society where gun wielding is normal, is the norm, you see that as a normal, you grow up watching that, that's the normal. But when you're living in a society where gun wielding is seen as a crime, that's seen as immoral. So it happens to be based on how you're born, where you're born, what your culture is like, what your, see, we talk about culture over here, like dressing up in a certain way and whatnot. In, let's say, in other countries abroad, you see people wearing beach clothes for when they are visiting the beach side, right? But in India, if you're doing something like that, it's considered, it's seen as immoral. I'm not agreeing with it. It's seen as immoral. Where does that come from? If you're talking about one true right morals, it, you can't be like, yeah, you know what, that is not right. In retrospect, that is not right. This is right. This is not right. This is right. We can't keep picking and choosing, right? That's essentially why I said, yeah, it's a society that we are building out of. Because yeah, it will crumble down at some point. It will. Because if you're building our laws based on a certain thing that has a very poor base, it will break down. And that's how big empires have broken down, because of certain, take Nazi Germany. Their moral was Jews are not okay. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. See, if the argument is that the culture that you're living in or the morality that you see around does not affect you at all, of course, it has a huge implication. But if you say that's the sole reason why people commit actions, or that's the only what factor that influences our morality, well, I would say no. Your culture does play a huge role that is there, but there are so many other factors that you would have been born into a particular cultural but uh, milieu, and your relatives and your parents would have believed something, but that might not necessarily be what you believe. So in that sense, you didn't flow with that tide of culture or their aspect of morality. So in that sense, so I agree with you. I agree that the culture that you're living in has a huge role to play, but it's never an excuse for the actions that you do. Or even like you're saying, your motivation. I might have the best motivations. You know what? I wanted to help my family, so that's why I killed them and I took my money. Now, my motivations might be justifiable to me, but that's not good enough to for me to escape the moral culpability of my action. So, pure motivations are not does not justify me from the acts that I do. The acts are different in and of itself. But I get
This
what you're saying in the sense
uh
like,
go
yeah,
go can you give me an example? So I'm not able to, like, because it's sort of going all over the place. I'm trying to bring it back. Like, when you give me an example of the the reasoning is not necessarily great if you're committing a certain act. It's not, you're not holding
no, yeah,
your,
that comes from the comment that you said the motivations are what are the
I
main.
said intent. Intent is different from motivation. Intent in the sense that, say for example, somebody is coming to stab me, and then I pick the nearest thing closest to me and then I stab them.
Sure,
My intent was not to kill them. My intent
correct,
was to stop them.
correct.
It's not
Self defense
motivation.
was your.
Motivation would be the other person's motivation to come and kill me. There
Sure.
be a see. I'm not saying that I did everything good in my life. That's why that's happening. I'm just talking about this one particular situation.
Yeah, but see, even in that, so if my intent was purely to harm you, if I was if to take a knife and to harm you, you would say that is wrong. But my intent was to protect myself, to self defense. Or if you're going to hurt my family, my thing was to protect them. You would say, well, that's a justifiable intent, right? That can hold up. Now there itself, you've put an arbitration of what is right and what is wrong. But if everything has a moral
No, no, no.
relativity,
Wait. I never said it's right or wrong. I said it's gray. We don't know. Because how would you determine somebody's intent is the question that I had asked.
hmm,
Yeah, because see, there is this.
yes,
I don't know if
whether
you
we
come
are able
across.
to
You would have.
determine or not, the fact that if you were to find out that his intent, if you were to find out, however it was that his aim was to save his family, then you would then that's a justifiable intent, right? Okay, that's so he's not morally culpable for a crime because he tried to save. But if everything is morally relativistic, then him killing that person out of pure anger or jealousy makes no difference from him killing that person, unless we say no,
This
there
is
is a
this is where you're going based on the black and white argument. If you kill, it's a crime,
no, no,
right?
no, 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 no. All
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying,
Because what you said was the action is not
no, I
justifiable
wouldn't
based
say
on
if you
what your
kill, it's
motivation.
a crime. Like a soldier has to kill in order to protect his country.
Why is that
So,
right? Wait. Let's come to this. This is an argument that I really like. Why are we protecting our country?
well, if there is a country that wants to invade our country and then obliterate or kill its citizens, then to act on a to safeguard
To
and to act
safeguard,
on its
what would you do?
citizens. Huh? Sorry, Lloyd. Can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, go on, Jacob. Go on, Jacob.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So I said, anyway, that's a different question. Anyways, coming back to this, I was asking the idea that nations protect themselves by going out and killing, then based on what you just put forth would be wrong, because the idea of protecting country is justified, but a person protecting themselves is not justified.
Why is it not justified? Like, say, if somebody comes to attack me and I try to protect myself, why is that not justified?
Yeah, and in the action I kill the person, right? In the action, let's say Jacob ends up killing the other person. uh okay, let's
No,
I think we are
but
on the same
I,
page, but we are.
I get the see. I completely agree with you in the sense that it is not black and white. All right, and so and neither is religion trying to give you. See, it's not like so the Ten Commandments was given to Moses and then that needs to apply over space. No, it is each you are trying to what it's culturally tied in that sense. So but it is based on some understanding of what it means, like human beings have value. Why are we even talking about murder? Because there is a particular value that we are putting onto human beings. Now that is that a arbitrary value? Am I just putting is I have a phone here and this has the same value as another human being? Is that an arbitrary value that I'm putting, or is there something that is beyond that? And so in one sense, to make
I
any
don't know.
difference.
I don't know how a religious text is acting as the moral justification. I mean, like a moral superior to every other
Oh,
person's
it's not.
moral.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that,
Okay.
because I have, I could be much worse of a human being, though I read the Bible more than you. So I'm not saying that me reading the Bible or acting, or because I am of a particular religious bent, I become a morally superior
No, I
person.
wasn't. I wasn't
All,
talking about you. I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about
no, I'm just,
how
yeah.
is the religious text seen as a moral superior? Is my question.
As
You
morally
say you
superior.
yeah
No,
you
yeah,
not
I'm
not
not I'm not saying that it's superior. All I'm saying is that it has to be grounded on objective morality for us to make these kind of decisions,
so.
even if it's
Uh,
misery.
give me an example of the objective morality that you're talking about.
um when, when the Pharisees asked Jesus, what is the greatest law, and so it is like, okay, here are a couple of laws, and it's all about the Sabbath laws, food laws, and so they are navigating. And what Christ says is, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. That is, there is an undergirding of absolute self-sacrificial love by which you act in the world. Now, if that is now how that manifests itself, how that manifests in art, in whatever way, in looking at another person, in clothing, in now that how how that propriety. Now, you can drive on the left side of the road or on the right side of the road, but you shouldn't crash into people, because if you crash into people, you break the law of love, and you cause harm to people around. So it isn't that the laws that are given here is absolute in terms of this is how you need to act this, but there is an undergirding rationale for which you need to act. If we come from a purely, I wonder how you could do that if not for basing it on God. If there is no transcendent value
Hmm.
that is there, and if we are all just uh, uh, or accidental but that again is an imposition of what all atheists think, that human beings are random, or processes of cells colliding with each other. That's also a wrong imposition, which I don't want to. But I wonder how you can come to objective morality, meaning, and purpose,
When you
if
said
not the wrong
objective,
method.
I again didn't get the example. Don't like I'd say don't give me an example from the Bible. I'm saying give me an example in real life where when you're talking about objective morality, like give me an example of something like that.
Yeah, but the thing
Like
is, see, we
universal love
assume,
is not objective morality. It's
no, it is the
subjective.
rationale by which we do our laws and
So
things. Now how that
essentially, what you're
manifests
arguing,
itself
what you're arriving to is subjective.
in the sense
Right?
of, see, I
Okay, so
actually yeah, I agree with you, how, and I don't have any problem with the subjectivity of it, like how that law, like say we are having a conversation right now, all right, now how does that law of love translate in me being generous and kind and trying to hear you out in a clear manner rather than just me making argument. Now how does that manifest itself? That's complicated, all right, and that's very specific to the situation. I can't extrapolate something like this and say, Lloyd, tomorrow when you speak to another person, this is what you need to think. But there is a level of mutual love and respect that is there. Now, there is something about that which is objective. How that translates into conversations, how that translates into situations can change. But
okay,
there is a framework which is there, and I don't think that is arbitrary. I don't think
okay,
that is random in
okay.
that sense.
So I'll tell you what I believe. Like you asked me how you think there is objective morality and morality in general. Again, I'll come back to this situation. Your morals are defined by where you're born and raised.
But that's
Okay,
not true.
that,
In the
that
sense, I'm born
if
in Bangalore and Kannadiga,
Mhm.
and what is that? Of course not. I've read Immanuel Kant. I've read Gandhi. I've read the Bible, and all these have played a role in the and shaped my thinking. I've
Yes,
spoken to people
that's
that
that's
has.
what that's what I'm coming to. We have developed morals over a period of time. See, if you're showing a kid, a grown adult who's lived their entire life in a secluded gated community, and if you show them a mobile phone, they'd be so freaked out because they don't know what that is. They wouldn't know what that is. They won't know how to use it. They'll freak out looking at what's happening over here. So
Correct.
when you're
I get
when you're
what it is.
that's what I meant. Like when you're
Correct.
when you're growing in a community, you're building your morals. I mean, the community builds its morals on several fathers and mothers, and like it comes down over a generation. And
Correct.
today,
And it's not
today,
arbitrary, like it's tried and tested, and then they see what works and things like that. That's true. And everyone is accountable to how much that they know, how much it's revealed. See, that is why, in one sense, Christian have a greater culpability, because the thing is, the revelation that's given to you is so great that you need to be accountable to that. Again, like your thing, if a person was just locked up in a room 30 years and then you brought that person out and he does not know any, he's answerable to the extent to which he knows. And so in that sense, you're right, everyone is limited to the limits of their world and their knowledge, and then they needs to act on that.
Hmm, hmm.
And so yeah, if that's the
I
argument,
mean,
I
see, I agree. I understand where you're coming from when it comes to thinking that or believing in a certain higher power embedding a certain level of morals, a certain set of morals, something that you would call yourself call that as like the internal voice of God, or like the moral conscience and stuff like that. But that's like, it's a very subjective thing when it comes to atheists and theists. It's a we see two sides of things. Yeah.
It is. See, in one sense, see, this is not a debate that we are creating, right? One of the things that Nietzsche really wanted to do was what he's the death of God movement. He's not saying that he's creating the death of God. It's like Western civilization with its breakdown of metaphysical structures
uh,
has already.
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of that. What is that?
No, like this is in one sense, Nietzsche's argument is also that Western civilizations, okay, with the advancement of science, okay, before you ground morality on a transcendent God, all right, so there is God and God gives more, and then you follow those morals. Those are the dictates, okay, so there is a meta narrative, and especially in the West, it's the Christian civilization, and it's the Christian meta narrative and then you act in the world. Now, what Nietzsche is going to say, especially in the dawn of the 19th century, is those kind of metaphysical framework don't hold ground anymore, all right, in a purely scientific, in a purely, so it's human, all too human, all right, world. So then, even then, he looks at himself as the one. So then he created the world. Actually, there are weak people who just follow herd morality, so whatever morality is put, and they follow the herd. Nietzsche takes it upon himself, all right, to be the one. But in order for civilization, say, in order for us to have a conversation, there has to be some uniform set of ethics. I need to wait for you to speak, and then otherwise, if that is not there, if there's no arbitrary law, then we can't function as human beings. So Nietzsche says that he will be the one who will provide. So who has to provide the world with the philosopher, the thinker? He's not just creating a morality for himself, but it needs to be so great that it needs to permeate into the ground, and normal, ordinary, what weak human beings will follow the morality that's set by the strong. And in one sense, that is what attracted. That's the philosophy that attracted Hitler, right? So, but the thing is, ultimately, he broke down, right? If you follow the story of Nietzsche, and then he's not able to do that because the underlying structures are so deep, and then his mind conks in that sense. So, in where was I going with this? Uh, in one sense, see, it is not a new debate. All right, the fact that human beings need to that ultimately human beings create their own morality, that there is no transcendent morality. But the person who kind of counteracted it was the Russian writer Dostoevsky. And one of the way he does it is through a novel. And where he says is there is this very clever guy, and he looks at his neighbor, and his neighbors are oh, they're pretty worthless and things like that. And he feels that if he kills them, takes their money, he can do something great for society. So he does that. He kills them, he takes their money, and he does something great for society. He's intellectual, and he's able to contribute so much to society. So he's able to rationally justify the act to himself. But how the novel is traced, and now we don't have to go by what he says, but what he says is powerful. He says, in the end, even though nobody has found out that he killed them, even though he has actually helped society much more, in the end, he falls on the ground and he kisses the ground because he cannot live with the guilt of his action. To say that, and this point is actually, we don't actually, we cannot create the weight of the moral law is so strong on us that even if we are able to rationalize it or just think, it's arbitrary, there is something that is
It
beyond
isn't.
us,
This is the thing.
which
It
pushes
isn't.
himself.
What you're talking about is also. I'm sorry to cut you off, dude.
No, no, no.
And dude, bringing that up is really crazy. You seem to be reading quite a bit. That's interesting. So, see, it's the fact that we have to see it as everybody has one set of morals embedded is where I would think there is
Correct.
an
I
issue.
agree with you,
Like
Kevin.
the guilty.
That's not true.
The guilt.
everyone, like, you need to have the exact set of morality I have in my mind, and to me to impose that, it's wrong. I shouldn't do that. Okay, but
So,
and maybe we can move from the morality question if it's okay.
oh yeah, sure, sure,
And
sure.
I do agree with you in the sense that it's always in the gray. But what I'm saying is it's not purely man-made stuff, all right, and it's not a pure arbitrary construction of society and things like that. It has something more to it. Now, how that manifests itself, how that plays itself out in the life of each individual, that can vary.
I
So
my agreement
Even, even
would be
before that,
different.
even before that,
Yeah.
I want to ask this question to Kevin again, back again. I want to be as neutral as possible. I'll be asking some questions to Jacob as well. So this question is, Kevin, what do you think? Hitler killed many people, millions and millions of Jews. What do you think
I'm
about his
I'm not able
acts?
to I'm not able to hear you, dude.
Can you?
Sorry. Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, yeah.
Hitler's
So
acts,
yeah,
committing
so
Hitler the
Hitler's
crimes.
act.
Mm.
Yeah, so he killed millions and millions of Jews. So what do you think? Is it right or wrong,
The act
according to
of
you?
committing. Yeah, dude. Who would say it is right? Nobody is say. Yeah, it's not
Yeah, so the thing is, on what basis are you saying that it's right and wrong or wrong?
based on the civilization's morals that we are living in right now.
All right, so my question will be,
yeah, but
if
in
yeah,
that sense, if the Nazis had won the war, and they could have easily, they could have
yeah,
overthrown. If US didn't involve themselves, they could have really won the war, and then civilized. We would have a different history.
Yes,
You
we
know,
would. We
yeah.
would.
So, but
Uh,
then you and I should still, even if we are living there, we should still have the hold to the fact that what they did is wrong, even though it is
See,
there.
I,
Other
I
people
I
might.
get I get what you're saying. But here's a question. What I would put forth. Like I said, when you're growing in that surrounding, when you're in, you need to understand that there were people living there who, when they came to know that such acts have been committed, they were unaware. First off, when they knew that something like this was happening, they were all termed Nazis. They're all termed Nazis. Are we saying all of these people who did not know are supposed to be accountable for this, right? Like, when we are talking about Hitler, the larger question has to ends up with that ends up being ignored is the fact that there are several of these people who are called Nazis, who are again wiped out without even knowing that something like that existed. They were vilified, right? What morals were there? There were no moral grounds. We saw you lived in that Nazi era. You worked for the SS. You worked for Hitler. You're a Nazi. Your morals are basically mud and water, and it's shit. You have to die, right? You understand what I'm trying to, the contrast that I'm trying to build. I'm not saying that these morals we won't hold. I'm saying these morals we'll hold, but because we built in that society. We didn't see Hitler kill his own kind, did we? Right? We didn't see Hitler kill his own kind. If that's the argument that we are going by, based on whether somebody killing a mass bunch of people is right or wrong, then there is someone I know out there who has committed mass genocide, who we read about today.
all right, yeah. I think maybe now the question is for Jacob again. Jacob, how will you defend that? I get what Kevin is asking now. The genocide that we can see in the Old Testament, how mass people have been. Yeah. So how will you defend that?
Defend what do you want me to defend, Lloyd?
So the thing is, there were multiple murders in the Old Testament that we can see, and God was silent.
Oh,
And
okay.
No,
so
no, no, no. Wait. God sent out waves.
yeah,
God sent out this thing wiping out generations.
yeah.
What about that? Innocent women, children, and men, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So the question is, how do we justify it? Is it how can we justify? And I don't think we are called to justify it. We don't have to try and skirt around the issue. And like you said, uh, I like God can only and again it needs to be looked at in its cultural context. All right, I'm sure 1,000 years later people can look at us and the way we treat our maids and servants here as absolute slavish. The economic disparity is so great, but in one sense we are living within this socio-cultural context that is there, or even the way we treat women in general, or people of yeah, different thinking. So in one sense, but they need to analyze us within our socio-cultural context and be able to see it. That doesn't justify us by any way. Okay, it doesn't justify our standards. But I think God can only approach or have a relationship based on people where they are at that point in time. And so and within the and this is there's quite a bit of literature on it. It is just was during that time. All right, during that time, those kind of genocides and war, there is a word for it, and it's just slipping my mind. I think the word is herem, HEREM, which was the and you see this within the Egyptian civilization, the Mesopotamian civilization at that point in time. These that was the code of fighting wars with each other. All right. Now that doesn't excuse the Jews; they should have a higher standard, which actually, however hard it is, they did when you compare it with the other. Whereas for them, they still had a conscience of saying, no, this is the extent to which we need to go. So it isn't justifying God as
Mm.
such, but it is to understand that God can only relate to a person to the extent to which they are. And I guess the Christian revelation ultimately roots itself in Christ, that Jesus is the ultimate reflection of who God is. And so if there's any violence there or any betrayal of truth that is there, then that needs to be looked at seriously. And so in the Old Testament, we are not justifying it, but there is a way to go around it.
So are you saying, Jacob, that God was being immoral when he allowed those things? So can you throw some light on that as well?
These are human choices, all right, and you can't impose that onto God and say God is being immoral. These are human choices. There is one part of biblical scholarship which says that even when you're showing this divine act theory, when you say God speaks, it's as though a voice from the clouds coming, and that's a very reductive way of looking at God. It's a way in which people are understanding God. Now there is a way in which I do an action, and then God has to understand that, and God allows it in that sense. So it you need to be we need to be able to look at it as the Jewish people trying to understand God, who God is. And if you look at the other civilized, and this is what are we talking about? Even before the Bronze Age, it's uh, so we have to look at that morality within that socio-cultural context. And so it's complicated, and we won't have time to get into the details of it. But there are
Uh,
a couple of books that can help us understand what were the code of war even at that point in time, and how they engaged with each other. So
I just have a
sorry,
question.
Kevin, I think you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Just a question, because I see that you see religious texts as sort of what I would call, how I see Panchatantra tales, or um, what is that, Jataka tales. These are tales of morals, and tales of stories, or sort of parables, if you want to call it, in the Bible, or stories that are being told, right? So I tell me, I mean, let me know if I'm getting this wrong, but do you see this as, I mean, do you see the Bible as something that helps you understand your belief in a certain God? I mean, your belief in this case, Jesus Christ, and treating it as a jump off point to understand how you see your personal relationship with a supernatural entity?
Wow, that's a good question. See, I definitely don't think, and I don't think as Christians we should look at the Bible as a set of morals or codes or a purely like the Panchatantra thing. What do you call those books? Like a moral story. Like, so they are different moral story. Because if that is why the Bible was written, you won't have David's life the way that it is, or you won't have Abraham's life that the way that it is.
Yeah,
So
but
in that sense, the
they are
Bible
they are
is stuck in their reality. Like it's showing, it's expressing reality as it is. Like these were the people. There's no great heroes. There's no what a perfect Superman figure there who's got everything right in that sense. So it is, and so in that sense, there is what it's a historical document. It is the life of the Israelites and how they understood the transcendent and the divine, and it points to Christ. Okay, Christ is finally the embodiment of Yahweh. It is the God that has been talked about in the Bible, comes to its final culmination and fulfillment in the flesh and through Jesus. So, in that sense, it has high value for me. It's the foundation on which I stand. But I won't use it like how I would use an Aesop's fable or purely moralistic text. And I don't think we should use the Bible purely for that.
No, when I said moralistic tales, it's for you to understand, being a jump off point to when you mentioned that you see it as a point that leads to Jesus Christ. That's what I meant. Like those are all jump off points for you, like cautionary tale. Cautionary tales are also moral tales, dude. It's not like there is a hero in these fables and stories and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Even
yeah. But
Arabian
it's a
Nights have
very
several
clear
stories.
moral. No, do not lie, do not steal. Okay, do not.
Yeah.
I don't think the Bible comes out like that. Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, but it's a very different, what do you call it? Theistic view that I'm seeing is one of a kind, dude. That's one of a kind.
But why would you say that?
Because people usually see it
You're
as
saying most Christians look at the Bible as purely a moralistic book.
no, no, no. I see most Christians view it as uh, a piece of historical thing that's way too truer than it actually is. Like there isn't any findings that reflect on Moses's um, what do you call it, the Moses slaving okay, actually enslavement of Israelites in Egypt is not a thing. We have found Egyptian mummies and Egyptian finds that are even before that, but we have not able to find historical significance of Israelites being treated as slaves. By the way, there were slaves, but they were not Israeli slaves. They were African slaves from down south that were brought in for building pyramids and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I mean, so, but
there are
see, in the sense, if you say that there are no evidence or no manuscripts at all to corroborate any type of Israelites intermingling with Egyptians in there, that's not true.
no, no.
But
I never
do I
said
think,
any
or
type of.
what you're
I
saying is
believe
right. The extent to which the biblical narrative gives, do you find any Egyptian manuscript that corroborates that? You don't. But I don't find that very surprising. It depends. Every nation would want it. It's actually a kind of shameful story. The Israelites had to leave in that sense, so they had to let go of those slaves. So it isn't a victorious tale for the Egyptians to talk about. So it would be very difficult to find
it's
that
not
as a
okay. So
historical.
it's not about texts that I'm talking about. It's actual physical evidences. When you're looking at historical, see, I'm not an expert in this, but when you're looking at evidences, archaeological evidences, they look at crafts. They look at religious. What do you call it? Traditions that were followed. There will be artifacts of religious traditions that were followed. There'll
See,
be
in
several
that
things.
sense, you can very clearly see it because the concept of the law did not come
Hmm.
to the Jews first. It actually came to the Egyptian civilization. The Hammurabi law, which was the one which came first. So the fact that you have the Pentateuch, what Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, the Deuteronomical law, where did they get the law from? It first came to the Egyptians, and it is from the Egyptians that. And so Moses is going to be educated with the laws of the
Again
time.
I'm not trying to say the see you're trying to corroborate evidence based on the Bible from the based from out of Bible. I'm saying we have not able to find a physical evidence, while for example, um we could, even to a certain extent, say for example, a historical figure like um, someone like Mahatma Gandhi lives, right? Or forget Mahatma Gandhi. Let's go back. Someone like Ashoka, King Ashoka lived in India. There are evidences of Ashoka's existence because the Ashoka Empire artifacts were found. There were several such things that were found. We even could tell who, what kind of people, what religion they were in, what kind of sects they were in, based on the artifacts that were found. This is where, uh, like, we haven't had a Israeli based artifacts found. Yes, there are artifacts found because there are traders from that time used to travel down to Africa because the Silk Route is through that way. So essential trade used to happen through that way. But uh, there are historical inaccuracies per se. But yeah, I mean, I understand if you would see evidences like in other texts, quoting other texts, because usually stories get passed on by word, but through messages, so that's also a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. No, see, it's very clear. Of course, Ashoka was a king, and like a very dominant king. Like he expanded the Mauryan Empire in that sense. He what this thing financially, economically, India does great, and then he sends the Buddhist scholar. So in that sense, he's a peak of a king. So the manuscripts and the inscriptions that are there will be very numerous. So if archaeological evidence, it's easier to find him because of the numerical numbers that's there. The thing with one thing with the Israelite, it's much older. Secondly, it's a small minority. It's not a major world story.
Wait, wait,
So
wait,
that
wait, wait.
we could easily not have found so many evidences of smaller tribes from different parts of Southeast Asia, which is there in India, and that's fine, you know. So because archaeology is limited in the amount it can excavate and get things. So a small group of people
But
at
that's
that
the
point in
problem,
time.
right? Like in terms, it wasn't a small group. People were enslaved. There was a huge. Apparently, according to the Bible, there is a the numbers are huge. How many people did Moses
A
carry?
very small minority. When you look at the
How
Egyptian
many?
civilization and the numbers there,
That's unfortunate that you say so, because during that era, during that the called era that you're like the Moses lived in, they haven't been able to find evidence of other, we found evidences of slaves from black slaves, basically down from down south, South Africa, and Nigeria, and from
but
there
what you
they've been
say,
able
Kevin,
to.
in the sense you're saying that this whole that the Israelites was never even enslaved by the Egyptians. Is that the theory that you're formulating?
There isn't yeah, there isn't archaeological evidence, at least corroborated by the archaeological society yet, of an existence of an Israeli slavery, enslavement in Egypt. Yeah.
See, we can't say is Israeli thing, like Israel as a country is formed in 1946. So this
Jewish,
has
if
to
you want
do.
to call it that,
Uh, mm,
because they carried people from Jerusalem, not Jerusalem. What was the place they were living in, and then they brought them to this place, right? People who were following Yahweh. Where was the place that they lived in?
yeah, but
Yeah.
it's highly unlikely. See, if you're saying that the type of biography or the type of historicity of the way they write their history needs to be exactly like what we see in Indian historians today, like how
No, again,
like Ramachandran
you're
Guha.
coming back to the fact that they've not written. Yes, history is written by people who win wars.
No.
I'm talking
I'm
about
not saying that.
excavating stuff. You know what? Here's the thing. There was a library that was burned in India, right? What was the library called?
In India,
Uh,
is it?
yeah, in the Indian Empire during that time, Mauryan Empire only, I believe. What was the
Okay, but
library there?
see, in the sense, what is the larger point you're saying? Like, in the sense, you're saying the biblical stories are not historical. Is that what you're
Uh,
saying?
n- yes, there may be a semblance to reality. but they are not necessarily historically accurate. Not
So, so,
necessarily.
so, Kevin, so are you saying that you don't believe in someone walking on water or changing water into wine, something like that, right?
Oh,
Something like that, right?
that's a given. That's a definite given. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, do you believe that Jesus existed in the past?
It's
You
not a
are, you are,
question of it's not a
yeah.
question of belief, but um, there are people who say this person existed, and I'm talking about a completely non-religious group of people who talk about this. There are people who talk about Jesus actually existing, and they're not a part of Christianity, is what I'm saying.
Hmm.
There is this Muslim fellow that I follow who is a
Zakir Naik?
no, no, not Zakir Naik. No,
Okay.
I'm talking about this other guy. He's a theist. I mean, he's a theological. What do you call it? He's a professor of theology. So he's
Scholar.
done research on. Yeah, he's a scholar. He's done research on various religions, and one of the things he talks about is he says there are evidences of someone named Jesus, because Jesus's name was common during those days, and somebody who has lived a certain life which was quite popular in that region.
Okay.
It's based on his account, but there are also accounts that non-religious people, non-Christians cite, which say that this person need not necessarily be the same person that we're talking about in the Bible, right?
Hmm.
So if you're asking me if I believe it, I don't necessarily I can't really say that some person like that existed per se. But yeah, there is also one side of me saying that yeah, it could be a possibility.
Could be a possibility.
You know,
Okay. Okay.
when they say something like a cockroach could live across generations, right?
Hmm.
There's a certain set of people who've found evidence of it, and there are other set of people who are saying no, it's not yet fully identified. There are still certain things that are missing out of it, so we can't conclusively say. So if you read about cockroaches surviving generations, like the ice age, not the
Hmm.
ice age, what is it, the dinosaurs, the era of the dinosaurs, also cockroaches existed. Those were the creatures that actually have survived as
Hmm.
a species.
Hmm.
It's like, I don't know why cockroaches, but so they apparently do survive.
Hmm.
But there are scientists who are still testing on it to see whether it is possible, or if they are mistiming the existence of this particular species of cockroach. You always have the embers, right? Embers consist of, what do you call it, the fossils. They usually consist of these cockroaches without getting damaged and stuff like that. So one such thing, when they discovered, they found it to be from the era of the dinosaurs, but it's not necessarily conclusive that it's from that era. They're still running their tests.
Hmm.
Scientists are still trying to figure out whether it's a possibility. So if you're it's the same for me, right? On one side you have the scientific community talking about this, whether such a person, I mean such a creature existed during that time or not, and this is a religious set of people talking about whether this particular person existed or not.
Hmm.
uh, it doesn't really make a difference to me.
Right. So this question will be for Jacob back again. The question is, hope yeah, since you're a Christian, you believe that Jesus existed and he died and rose back again. So, what are some evidences that you'll give? I mean, did Jesus exist, and what are some evidences that you will give as a Christian? So yeah, Jacob. Yeah.
See, just based on taking off from where Kevin says, like I wouldn't put any community into a monolithic community. Like there are, even whether it's scientists or historians, there are historians which are in the major ends of the spectrum. You have people like Bart Ehrman and things like that who feels that the New Testament is a complete fabrication that's there. And then you have Orthodox, very fundamental group who believe that it's written like word for word, accuracy of historicity. And then there is a whole group of historians and scholars in between that who piece together the evidence. If you're asking me personally, the existence of Jesus, or the whether a person like called Jesus lived. I mean, that is undisputed. Even when who Richard Dawkins at one point made a statement that he didn't Jesus never existed. He was flagged by a lot, especially by the community of the historians and social sciences, saying that you're going beyond what you're. He's a what evolutionary biologist, and to make a historical claim like that. And then finally, he went back on his statement. He's like, finally, he says, I don't care whether he could have existed. I don't care. Christopher Hitchens, he made a statement that, there isn't enough evidence for the existence of Jesus. But then the amount of historical evidence for the life of Alexander is lesser. And so then Hitchens says, well, I don't believe that Alexander also existed, which is fine. You can go on a complete skeptical route about it. But the life of Christ has been. There's quite a few examples. The famous ones which are quoted is Josephus, Tacitus, a lot of other Philo, non-Jewish, non-Christian, who's writing from a Roman imperialist perspective, still acknowledge it. But again, those are also disputed, right? There are so many scholars who say, well, the Christos who's talked about here, is it really the Christ? Because there were many people who posed themselves to be Messiah. So in that sense, I root it particularly on the historical Jesus. But even the whole apologetic endeavors of trying to root Jesus in history, it's remarkable and it's appreciable, and we have to do it. But there's always another side to it, and but like I said, the evidence that I believe are one is the Gospels themselves, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We look at it as purely religious text, but when you the Bible is not the same as a religious text as another Middle Eastern text. It's come to us through history. Even though we don't have the first manuscript, like whether John's first manuscript, but then you see a series of other manuscripts, and then you connect it back. So within the historicity game, there's more than enough evidence there. But again, it is, there's always another side to it. It doesn't. Sorry if it doesn't help, Lloyd. I'm just maybe creating more doubt than
Yeah, that's fine.
but see, I
Yeah,
am very
I
wary
think
of trying to like force a particular level of scientific surety on it. And I don't think we need to do that, or what it really entails to live a life of faith in Christ. So,
yeah. So I'm with Jacob on this fact that it doesn't matter, to be very honest. Even for me as an atheist, it really doesn't matter to me whether someone like Christ existed or not. If you're able to live by a certain set of morals that goes without hurting anyone, and if that morals or that responsibility that you're seeing is through this person, well, good. Because if we are talking about evidences and stuff like that, historical, we see Rama as a do we see Rama as a historical?
I think, Kevin, you're stuck. We're not able to hear you. Yeah.
Sorry,
Kevin, we lost you.
sorry, what happened? Can you hear me now?
Can you hear us? Yeah.
Am I back? Yeah, I can hear you guys. Something happened. So there are evidences of Rama existing. The Lord Rama in the Hindu text, there are evidences of Rama existing, but it is being doubted by several of the archaeologists and several of the historians about the validity of Jesus Christ and several other religious entities, for that matter. And that's okay. I see. I'm not here going to be like, this person doesn't exist. This person it does. It's not going to make a difference to any of us, because I'm pretty sure I'll go living my life the way I believe, and
yeah,
Jacob
I
or
mean,
anyone else would go for
if I could
Lloyd.
interject here, it makes a whole load of difference for me. If Jesus didn't really exist, then I should really be doing something better with my life or something else. So his historical reality and him as a historical person is fundamental to my belief in who he is. And see, the imposition that we have of, can we impose the same criterias on Rama as we do in the historical Jesus? Well, we can't. It's just because of the nature of history, of how the Jews write their history and how we as Indians have looked at our history. Okay, it's never a particular rooting a person on particular dates and giving biographies have never been important to us, because myths have been more important than actual history, because myths happen over and over again. History happens only once. Whereas for the Jews, to record their history and to see the biography of Jesus, that which we have seen, who our hands have touched, we have spoken to, it's not mythical at all. It's an actual biography. So the type of literature is very different. It's like Lloyd. I think we lost him.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, where do we stop?
Yeah, what I was basically saying is that the imposition that we have, okay, like our stories from the Ramayana, and as opposed to the biography of the Jew. So and it's not wrong. It's just a different way of looking at the world. So here within the Indian civilization, to record history and actual biographies has never been an important thing. The closest that we can come to is actually the Buddha. And that's the only what accurate dates and person that we have. Apart from that, we have not. It's just that later
Uh,
on,
we see here's the difference, right? You're talking about a different era altogether.
not just a
Like,
different a different civilization and a different group of people and
yeah,
how
yeah,
they
of course,
reckon
of
their
course. But here's the difference. We are seeing people cite texts, and we're finding artifacts today that are claimed to be of Rama's generation, from Rama, or during that Rama Sita Lakshman story. Uh, In fact, to a certain extent, some of uh, the path that is being covered is also like through the Ramayana. The Valmiki written Ramayana has also been corroborated. But again, we see that as a myth, right?
see
We do see that as a myth.
See, but by myth, by myth, if we say a purely fantasy story, then in the sense we are not how when we are talking about myth, there is something like Lanka has a resonance to the geography of India. So there are, I think, it also can be how people looked at racial communities, North India, how they looked at South India. So there are resonances to reality that is there. And so when we peer, but our way of looking at interpretation, right? Hermeneutics is how you read texts, all right? And texts are always written within its social, cultural context. Just like movies are. 2000 years, if a person just looks at one Rajnikant movie that's there, he won't understand it for what it is. But if you are understanding the gambit of South Indian movies and things like that, then you're able to. But it'll be very different from the a movie that you are talking about. The hearing that girl who moves from a family, because that requires a different interpretation. So uh, all I'm saying is that just because two are religious texts and two are religious figures, looking at one as myth, one as history, is we can't make that comparison. Is apples and oranges, or not even within fruits. It's like apples and the weather or something. Uh,
You you you
Bible
s-
is
you
written
see
on biographies. All right, it's historical biographies that is there. Again,
that
I can
that's
qualify
that's
it.
where that's where you would see it as that. But when it comes to me, I have to see it. I'm having to see it differently because of the kind of evidence that it puts forth. When you're talking about biographies, like you mentioned, this is something that is has what is it called
Fantastical element.
fantastical elements. Yeah.
Sure.
So hence, even this religious text have their fantastical elements. That's where I would not really go with the idea that, yeah, I see this as a norm. I see this as a biological. What am I saying?
Biographical.
Biographical thing.
Sure, sure. But I don't think it's as open to interpretation as what we feel like in that sense. There is a particular way of looking at Bible. There is an actual historical method of reading it. Now, you don't have to agree with the elements that is there. But then from that to say that this is a pure fantasy, that this person didn't exist, it is to move on the other side. It is to move on the high side of
Oh,
skepticism,
no.
which most
I didn't.
historians would put
I don't
somewhere in the
agree with
center.
that either. See, I would land somewhere in the center, like you mentioned. I would land on the fact that I don't view it as
Yeah,
as a reality. Neither do I see it as a fiction. It's somewhere where we don't really have enough evidence of it. Is where I would sit back on.
All right.
And I'm okay with that. I don't think it should be a necessary element for people in general. Like
yeah,
even for people who believe, who have a certain belief, right?
Mm.
Yeah, a certain, like you mentioned, for you it is important because your study revolves around it. But to several Christians that I know, it's not necessarily all that important. It's not a point of conversation. It's not a point of their life. Their life does not revolve around the existence of Jesus Christ or not. Their life
sure.
revolves around whether their belief is taking them to a meaningful life that's always put forth,
Sure, sure.
right?
I see.
That,
In the sense,
so
see,
that's what I
my
was
cook is a
driving to.
Christian and she can barely read. She listens to the audio. So for her to place the imposition that he needs to look at Jesus as an actual historical figure and then look at the historiograph is too much of an imposition on her. Whereas on the other end, you would have highly, very sophisticated historians who are able to understand the nuances of the Jewish text and understand the history of it. But God acts to all of them. Whether it's to her or to the sophisticated historian, it's not necessary. I would say it's not necessary to have a level of sophisticated historical knowledge in order to be a Christian. If you have the resources and if you have the time and if God has blessed you with what a mind to figure that out, go for it. There's nothing wrong in it. But to say that to be a Christian, or this is like the minimum requirement, you need to know these things. It's okay.
Mm.
It's okay. There are people on
Okay.
different
Yeah,
sides.
and
Yeah. Okay. I think we're just
we are hitting
yeah.
4 hours. I mean, like 2 hours now.
Yeah.
I think we
All
could
right.
go for another 2 hours.
Yeah,
Maybe
man.
we can create a part 2 and then we can yeah. Okay. Now we are gonna close this whole thing. So I'm gonna ask both of you any closing thoughts. So starting from Kevin and then Jacob, or who wants to go first? Time's open. Anyone wants?
Yeah,
Yeah. Kevin.
I'll
Yeah.
take it up.
Yeah.
So I'll just say this: I had a fun time having conversation with Jacob because I think I get to see a completely different perspective that I've not necessarily thought about or seen before amongst people I usually tend to have a conversation with, who are very religious extremists, and it's actually for me it's enlightening because someone like Jacob has a different mindset, and I'm glad to see that kind of mindset amongst the religious people. If that's the mindset people have, I think we are in for like a better world. And yeah, I think that's where I'll end it. It's a pleasure meeting you, Jacob, and
Sure.
I would love to have a conversation not about religion but about your life because that's something that I'm very curious about, and your about the things that you've read because I'm not an avid reader. So that's really cool that you're much well read. You know your stuff quite a
Not
bit,
really.
dude.
It's just
So
certain things here and there pieced together. But thanks.
yeah, but that's damn cool. I mean, that big respects and thanks, Lloyd, for inviting me.
Hey, man.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I I leave this conversation taking back a lot more than I brought to the table. So that's something that's that's going to stick around for quite a bit. So
Jacob.
Yeah, definitely. Uh, I think I've left. I'm leaving with a lot more than what you have taken. But you know what? Actually, Lloyd, I've never done this before. Speaking, having a dialogue like this, and I've always wondered how that would turn out and things like that. And most of the things that I've seen is very strong, hard debates and things like that. And then I've missed the point of what it is. See, and I think, see, one thing as Christians, what we can do is be very close-minded in the way we engage with another. So we could think that Kevin has nothing to offer us. We have the truth, and then we need to impose that truth onto Kevin. Uh, but what I see and what anybody would be able to see is a level of honesty and a level of wanting to pursue the truth and not just say whatever you want to say, but engage with the person. And I think that's a huge lesson for us Christians to take away. Even if through this conversation is just the whole attitude and demeanor of wanting to know the truth, wanting to pursue it wherever that truth leads the person. If that, if and so he's been honest to himself, uh, which which is not something that I can say for many Christians. That we know, are we really honest in ourselves, or is it just because this has been in our cultural milieu that we've taken for yourself? So, but having said that, I think I'm a firm believer in Christ. I don't see a life outside of Him, and within my worldview, that is the best life that you can live. And so, in that sense, so it would always be there. I accept you. I accept everything that your intellectual prowess and your understanding of the world that is there. But I would definitely pray for you. I would pray for you. I want what is best for you in that sense. And I would always pray in Christ's name. And it's hard for me if I think that the best life you can live is in Christ, then how can I pray for Kevin outside that? Is it possible for me to say, it doesn't matter if Kevin doesn't know Jesus, he can still live the best life? In all honesty, I can't. All right. So even if I want what is best, I still have to pray for it under Christ. But and that's me. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this, Kevin. I've thoroughly enjoyed what you do and your level of honesty and your level of respect that you show.
Cool.
And I hope that we as Christians take you seriously